My name is Olivia Mann. I work on the news and politics team at YouTube, and we've seen the news and political genre on YouTube grow sort of exponentially over the last couple of years. A lot of that we attribute to the election and great interest around the 2008 presidential election. But we've also seen sort of citizen reporting and the phenomenon of everyday citizens kind of out there with their cell phone cameras capturing news events, you know, by accident or perhaps on purpose, and uploading that to YouTube. We've seen that phenomenon really, really grow, and I'm sure, you know, you've all seen it, and as people in the news industry have you know, been able to use some of that coverage in your own reporting. And what we were seeing is this phenomenon on YouTube, as well as our news partners that are on the site who are producing professional content, you know, and using YouTube as a distribution pipe. But what we weren't really seeing was ways for news organizations to really tap into and leverage this organic activity that was happening from these citizen reporters. And so the idea behind YouTube Direct, which is this platform that we've created, it's an open source tool that's built on top of the YouTube API, is providing a tool for news organizations to more easily request, review, and rebroadcast citizen reporting content. So in essence, it allows any third-party site, any news organization, to take the upload functionality of YouTube and embed it into their own site so that they can create a kind of virtual assignment desk. And we launched with 7 partners a couple weeks ago, all of whom started out with sort of a launch assignment, everything from, you know, submit your science videos at NPR to you know, show us street performers in San Francisco, the San Francisco Chronicle. But really the idea is to give some control to news organizations to better harness that citizen reporting that's happening on YouTube every single day.
But I guess my question is, and well, Keith, tell us a little bit about what the plans are at NPR.
I'm Keith Jenkins, supervising producer for multimedia at NPR, and I guess a couple of things, but I think the primary thing that we look at YouTube Direct for is another way to connect with our audience. And I think that, you know, traditionally we have started, especially in the news business, with people writing letters, and, you know, when you're on the radio, people call in, people call and leave messages, but there's no reason to think that part of what we're learning now through things like Facebook and Twitter are that people want other ways to connect. And so for us, we see YouTube Direct as a social media tool as much as anything else, because more and more of our listeners are people who carry cell phones with video in them. More and more of our listeners are people who have kids who have grown up using Final Cut Pro and all of a sudden can produce, you know, quality video as, you know, for school projects. So we want to be a little bit out in front of that. We don't necessarily limit it to that, and I think we're going to see what the platform does and grow with it as our aspirations grow.
You know, I think I'm a little bit skeptical about mainstream media soliciting and publishing valid, useful, user-generated video. We've seen, you know, CNN iReport has done quite a lot of that. Does anybody see sort of beyond connecting and creating a community, video that will be of enduring interest, value, that can be advertised against, that's created by consumers in mainstream media? Dan?
Well, there's definitely a place for it. The big challenge for mainstream media, or any media actually, is if you want to be accurate and trusted, then you need content that conveys that. And I think with a lot of this citizen journalism, so to speak, there's a challenge, which is how do you vet it? I think the Iran protests, for example, was, you know, a good place where there was a great deal of video that we all used, and we weren't really certain that we could stand behind it, but yet we put it up anyway in kind of good faith. But I think over time there are lots of things you can do with the idea of everybody being their own publisher and movie producer, which is you could have people submit man on the street for any topic. You can link polls and user video and have people judge whether it's a good video or truthful or not. You can put people on assignment, especially local, because I think local is the area where there's a huge amount of growth.
And YouTube has a big local operation. Tell us a little bit about that, Olivia.
Yeah, that local is definitely an area of we see as a huge area of opportunity. We launched a feature a few months ago called News Near You, which is a local news offering that essentially looks at the user's IP address and then serves up local partner videos within a 100-mile radius. The click-through rates on that module, which is currently living on the news page, although given the amount of interest we've seen in it, we're hoping to promote it to the homepage and other more prominent areas on the site. But the click-through rates on that are around 5 to 10%, which on YouTube is just enormous. I mean, just really, really much higher than they are on other places on the site. So this has shown to us that there's a lot of interest in local news, and I think we're going to continue to push that, especially in the citizen journalism area. And actually, I say citizen journalism, but I'll take that back for a second. We prefer not to use that term at YouTube because we prefer citizen reporting. We think that anyone can report, anyone can document, but not anyone can be a journalist, as all of you well know. And what Dan just mentioned about the verification piece, we think is absolutely critical. A huge part of inspiration for creating the YouTube Direct tool was actually to give that control back to the mainstream traditional media organizations by allowing you to actually contact the user that submits this video. So instead of just culling content from YouTube, going to YouTube and searching, which is how I think a lot of publishers and broadcasters today are leveraging YouTube, which is great, and using it under fair use, the key feature of YouTube Direct is actually having access to the user that submitted that video so that you can follow up with them on the phone, over email, to verify that content and really feel confident before actually incorporating it into your coverage.
Bill, did you want to comment?
I guess Bill Smee, I'm with Slate V, the video arm of Slate. My question really has, I guess, more to do with, I think, point well taken about verification, but it strikes me that I don't know how much of this stuff is actually going to be watched. No, I wouldn't dare disrespect YouTube, whose traffic I would gladly have any day. But I mean, the Iranian protests are certainly an example of a searing event where this was the only media that came out of there, and therefore you probably saw humongous traffic. But it seems to me you're talking about a lot of stuff that is not particularly compelling, and it's a lot to sort and sift through even for a publisher. I mean, we have dabbled in user contests that resulted in stuff that, frankly, we weren't that happy with. Now, I know that given the volume that YouTube traffics in, there's bound to be, I just don't think it's a very high yield environment. So I'm just curious about those who are working with your new program, what some of the early results are, because I'm a little skeptical.
Well, I would imagine that a lot of the interest on the part of big established media organizations is finding the diamond in the rough, particularly on breaking news stories where, in this day and age, a citizen might actually get the one shot that all the experienced camera people and TV people didn't get. I know that there was a high level of interest in all of the individual citizen reporting and video reporting when the plane went down in the Hudson River, for example. When the bridge collapsed in Minneapolis, it was actually a security camera that I think CNN actually got and was showing, but it was the one for all of the expensive helicopter shots of the bridge after it collapsed. It was the one piece of grainy video that actually showed the bridge collapsing. So I think that there's going to be, now obviously you have to go through the process of sorting through it all and finding that, but I think that's probably one reason why certainly big network news organizations and big newspapers would be very interested in having
Caroline?
It's very much like Twitter and the fact that at some point there are going to be probably 6 billion people, and not very far away, in a few years, 6 billion people on the planet with a camera phone and access to putting that content somewhere. So you kind of have to wonder how that changes in terms of the access we would have to that kind of real-time, instantaneous, someone was actually there at the point that something happened, and how we refactor that content into what we put on the air or on the web.
what we do I'm Caroline Little. I'm CEO of North America for Guardian News and Media, and we've actually used video a lot for investigative reporting. And in one case, fairly recently, which was a big story in London, this man, Ian Tomlinson, was, walking through the G20 protests and fell down and died. And there was some sense that there was some police brutality involved, but the police did the first autopsy or whatever and said, no problem. The reporter didn't believe that, and so he reached out to all of the users of The Guardian that he had email addresses for, and he said, was anybody there that day who has any video of this? And he collected like 20 videos, and in fact he found that the guy was walking through the protest, hit on the head by the police, and was in fact died from hemorrhaging. So I guess there is a lot that one has to sort through, particularly with local contests, for example, but we view this as an incredibly important part of journalism and truth-telling, and I know it's hard to verify sometimes. We had the same verification issues at the Washington Post when the Abu Ghraib photos came in. Well, you can kind of figure it out when you get some good journalists, so journalists can use that information from our readers as a trusted source to help, and I think, in that way, video, Twitter are just incredibly important tools for us as journalists.
Yeah, one thing that I think is clear is that there's no substitute for good strategy around these kind of things. You can't just put out a form and say upload stuff and we'll look through it. Taking a very specific event like that, and like what the New York Times did with our platform in the Iranian elections, is saying, we're looking for very specific types of footage in a very specific time window. Then you can get results from it, as opposed to just, opening it up to everything. I wondered if others would see the same thing.
When you think about it, though, it's really just the classic process of reporting that journalists have done for decades and centuries even. It's just that now, in the past, you would go around and interview all the people who might have seen something. Now so many people have access to video, might have actually seen it but then shot it, that you can reconstruct the story in a visual way, when in the past you could only do it with interviews and with eyewitness accounts.
It's kind of like taking your editorial, direction and request directly to the people, as opposed to having it be filtered through, a reporter's only.